Hello there. I, of course, love the art of motion picture filmmaking, but there are certain cliches that do annoy me every time they show up, whether it's a storytelling decision or a directing one. So let's get right to it. Here are the top film cliches that annoy me the most. In-your-face product placement. I understand that product placement exists in real life too. I mean, we are surrounded by advertising to the point where Morgan Spurlock actually made a whole documentary on the subject, and to prove his point, it was funded entirely by advertisers. But sometimes the film will obviously push a product in your face and becomes a major distraction. For instance, there's a scene in The Smurfs that's simply there to sell Guitar Hero. It doesn't further the storyline or develop the characters. That scene merely exists to sell you the latest PlayStation video game. And it's really obnoxious. Or to use a very recent example, Man of Steel actually has a fight scene inside of an IHOP, and they remind you multiple times in the dialogue that there's an IHOP in Smallville, and have the logo appear quite clearly on the screen. Even more ridiculous is when the Sears logo takes up 3/4 of the frame at one point. Though the award for most perplexing product placement goes to SeaWorld, approving their park as a setting for Jaws 3D. Why would you want to advertise that your park has a man-eating shark that will try to eat your guests? That's product placement gone awry for you. Celebrity voices hired for their name only. Ever since Robin Williams made a splash as the genie in Aladdin, it's become common practice to get a big-name celebrity to be in an animated film. Now, you have those who are chosen because their voice perfectly fits the characters. However, you also have a lot of cases where celebrities are chosen simply because they are well known. This is particularly annoying when their voices are as generic as they come, and it's painfully obvious when they don't care and are basically reading into a microphone. How is it that Meryl Streep, who seems like she puts on a new accent in every film, sounds incredibly dull and generic in both The Ant Bully and Fantastic Mr. Fox? And don't even get me started on Nicolas Cage's animated voiceover jobs. A very confusing case is the Alvin and the Chipmunks franchise. Why bring in names like Justin Long, Amy Poehler, and Anna Faris to voice chipmunks when their voices are going to be sped up anyway? Or there's the case of Kung Fu Panda, in that while Jack Black, Dustin Hoffman, and Gary Oldman brought a lot to their roles, there was no reason to hire Angelina Jolie and Jackie Chan to voice the Furious Five, when professional voiceover artists would have brought a lot more. People like Billy West and Tara Strong are pretty much trained to voice animated characters, so why not use them? It's because studios think celebrity names bring people to animated films. They don't. Appealing characters do, regardless if you get Ben Stiller or David Schwimmer to voice them. The Despicable Me series isn't successful because Steve Carell voices Gru. They're successful because of those gibberish-speaking minions everybody loves. For every celebrity like Kristen Wiig who understands how voice acting works, there's also a Sarah Jessica Parker merely doing an animated film for the paycheck. The evil developer. I've gone into detail about this before, but this has become the laziest and most obvious villain you can put into a film, and family films especially love to use this one. You know, the antagonist wants to tear down a beloved landmark, and now a hero has to stop him. Rattling off a number of films that use this tired cliche would be Yogi Bear, The Country Bears, The Borrowers, The Fairly Odd Movie, The Muppets, Hey Arnold the Movie, Casper, Spirited Beginning. Okay, I get it, Hollywood. Why do you have to routinely return to this stock villain? I guess it started with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, with Judge Doom's plan to build a highway over Toontown, but that was inspired by real events and meant as a commentary on the evolution of Los Angeles into a bunch of roads, and it was done to much more humorous effect due to Eddie Valiant's scoffing. But I think this cliché has been done to death and frankly kind of insulting to actual developers. Slow motion. I don't know why this trick is so popular with modern filmmakers, but it really annoys me. Action films tend to use this a lot to appear all stylish, but it actually takes me out of the scene because it makes me fully aware of the editor's hand. I guess The Matrix popularized this for the 21st century, but I feel it really harms the excitement of an action scene as well as the overall pacing of the film. There's a reason why comedies make fun of slow motion, because it's stupid and overdone. I think Sherlock Holmes is the only time it didn't bother me, since it was shown to convey the title character's thought process. However, most of the time it simply turns a 10-minute action scene into a 15-minute action scene. The jerk boyfriend. In romantic comedies, when the lead protagonist is in love with a girl, they always like to make her boyfriend a completely horrible person. But what really aggravates me about this cliché is how every other character minus the lead is completely oblivious to this. The Wedding Singer did this to extreme effect, but the biggest example is The Ex, where the entire premise revolved around this cliché, as Zach Braff tries to convince everyone else what a truly terrible individual Jason Bateman is. And my goodness, that was a really bad comedy. It's so refreshing to see films like Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Sleepless in Seattle portray the other boyfriend as a likable chap. But unfortunately, most romantic flicks like Wedding Crashers, to name another example, decide to make the antagonist an obvious cardboard cutout and then write everybody else into oblivious idiots. The workaholic father. An easy way to make your child characters unlikable is to turn them into utter whiners because their father is working hard to put food on their table. It just makes them seem underappreciative of all the long work hours their father put in for their benefit. Evan Almighty, Jingle All the Way, Casper, Spirit of Beginning, and Mr. Popper's Penguins are all such examples of films that fall into this trapping. The children in Popper especially annoy me because when he later does the right thing and realizes a high-rise Manhattan apartment is no place for penguins and gives them to the zoo, Jim Carrey's children immediately think he's the son of Satan. How dare you do something logical and morally right? The only director who's able to make this cliché work is Steven Spielberg, who is pretty much the master of the absentee father trope and understands how to make these stories work without turning the children into whiny, ungrateful twerps. However, the directors behind those previous efforts I mentioned are no Spielberg. Shak Cam. I love a fun, rollicking action sequence when I can actually see what's going on. I don't know when the tendency began for directors to start shaking the camera, but all it really does is make me seasick. Beasts of the Southern Wild was a great little film, but I would love if the director just kept the camera still. I think it's an attempt to look more realistic and documentary-like, but you can still do that while putting the camera on an out-of-control roller coaster. This is especially irritating in action scenes. I remember seeing The Bourne Ultimatum and not knowing who was punching who because the camera was constantly shaking like a wild bull in a rodeo. Maybe because they want to give the feeling of a lot of movement, but one need only look at Stanley Kubrick's The Shining to show you can still convey that while keeping the camera nice and steady. The unnecessary epilogue. This is something I feel smaller films tend to do more than big budget blockbusters. It's essentially when the director has the perfect shot to end the film on, fades to black, and then he adds some unnecessary scenes that pads another 10 or so minutes to the runtime that ultimately add nothing. It's like the director is so in love with his own material that he wants the audience to keep watching his film forever, not realizing it actually harms the finished product. A rule of thumb is also that the more boring a film is, the more likely this is going to happen. I remember going to see one agonizing picture, and when they pulled this trick, I do something I never do and actually shouted, "Damn it!" out loud in the picture house. The audience should be cheering at the end because they like the film, not because the director finally put an end to it. Food fights. My problems with this cliché are both narrative-based and ethical. First of all, it's such a lazy way to create conflict in a story. Secondly, because this happens in family films, often in school cafeteria environments, I especially feel it sends a wrong message to children that it's okay to waste your food. Yes, I'm sure poor, starving people would appreciate you throwing a perfectly edible pizza across the room. And I also extend this to pie-in-the-face gags, which I've also never found the least bit funny. Kubrick himself originally planned for Dr. Strangelove to end with a pie fight, and the scene was shot, but he then changed the ending when he realized how stupid it was, and it didn't fit the tone of his intelligent Cold War satire. I don't think food fights are the least bit funny, and they always leave me wincing. However, my personal pick, the most annoying film cliché, is The Misunderstanding. I stated that food fights was a lazy way to create conflict, but The Misunderstanding is an even bigger one. I actually have a soft spot for romantic comedies, but it really annoys me when they pull this contrived storytelling device in the beginning of the third act to break apart the two protagonists. If the characters just talk for 5 seconds like regular human beings, this would be over with quickly. The Wedding Singer, White Christmas, The Nutty Professor, Shrek, and a whole bunch of romantic comedies have pulled this shtick, and I'm getting sick and tired of it. Rock of Ages actually had the gall to actually build up to that moment. I can't even think of one exception to the rule, but it aggravates me every single time it's used to break up two characters, especially since the only way the writers can pull it off is to lower the character's IQ by many digits. I really hope screenwriters will stop resorting to this tired cliche once and for all.